Hi everyone, and welcome to And Sew On. My name is Lisa, and today we're going to talk about sewing with knit fabrics. Now, I'm sure lots of you out there sew knits all the time and are not worried about it at all, but I know that for me, when I first started sewing, knits just were really intimidating. I was really nervous about it, and so I want to do this also because this book just came out. I thought it was good timing, and unless you've been living under a rock, you know about this book, probably more in the UK than over on this side of the pond. But Tilly and the Buttons just put out this lovely book on stretch, and I actually pre-ordered this on Amazon when it first was available to pre-order. And I'm not really going to do a review of it because there's so many people who have, and just Google it really quickly. But I will say, I love it. I'm keeping it. I wouldn't if I didn't really love it. I'd take it back once I flip through it, but I really like it. I think that there's so many great tips, and one thing I love is that she really talks about sewing on a regular sewing machine. So I have a friend who's lent me a serger, and it's been my plan for a while to get it all threaded and try it out. But to be honest, I have such luck on my regular sewing machine with knits, I don't really feel the impetus to, have to figure out a serger because I'm so happy with the way things look. So let me start by showing you what I'm wearing. I just made this yesterday. Let me stand up. Okay, so here's my Durango tank. This is a free pattern, and I'll link it below. And I used some of the gray knit that I got at the sale there, the big fabric haul that I did, and I'll link that up in case you haven't seen it. It's a really nice swingy tank. I was kind of between sizes and I cut the larger size, but there's also an option to take in the back seam a little bit and kind of curve that, and that was a really interesting thing. I'd never seen that in a pattern before, so I did use that option. I really like the neckline on it. The neckband turned out well. The armholes, not quite as well. The instructions for this were all on a serger, and like I said, I don't have a serger, and I wish that they had given you sewing machine instructions for the armholes because I felt it didn't work quite as well. But overall, I love it. I love the line, and I will definitely be making more maybe today. Okay, back in my cardi because it's not quite warm enough yet at all for tank tops here in Toronto. And actually this was one of my mom's cardigans, so it's kind of nice to wear something that was hers. So before I keep going, I want to announce the winner of my giveaway because you guys probably are wondering about that. So I just did I put all of the possibilities in with the few extras for the people who were on Instagram with me as well. And the winner is Ishi Lynn, or I Shy Lynn. And she wrote, I visited the minimal approach. I keep my clothing simple, so seems like a good channel for me to follow. So please do, Ishi Lynn, contact me below, leave me a message with your email address or email me so that I can get your address and I can send you that beautiful Avid Seamstress pattern that was so generously donated by Fabric Spark. So thank you again, Daryl at Fabric Spark for donating that, and I will get that on your way to Ishi Lynn ASAP. Okay, so my tips for sewing with knits. And before I start my top 5, I'm gonna say, don't be intimidated. Sewing with knits is actually pretty easy and very forgiving. And if you're like me and I've never sewn a buttonhole, and I've sewn 2 zippers. So I like things that have alternatives to zippers and buttonholes, and knit fabrics, you don't have to do any of that. No closures, none of that complicated stuff. And on top of that, who doesn't love to just live in knits all the time? For me, I work from home. I don't need to dress up for the office or anything like that. And so I love things that are comfortable, and I just want to live in knits. And so I've really got into sewing with knits, and I will continue to do so. So how have I been successful with that on my sewing machine? So a couple of my top tips are, number 1, make sure that you get either a jersey or a ballpoint needle. Jersey needle, ballpoint needle, there's a few different names for them. Make sure you have that. It's a must. You must have that. If you don't, you'll get skip stitches. You will not have a clean line, okay? Number 2 is use a walking foot. I use a walking foot. I actually leave my walking foot on my Elna Lotus. I almost never take it off. It's great for thicker fabrics, and it's great for knits. And what that does is it looks intimidating because it's kind of this huge foot. But really all it is kind of adding a second pair of feed dogs, so that rather than, just the bottom moving the fabric along, it has 2 things moving the fabric along. And so sometimes what happens with knits is they become slightly misaligned, and that's how you get kind of bunchy seams and you know, really not nice looking flat seams. So when you have the walking foot on, it just moves everything through at such a nice pace. Another thing that's nice to have, and it's not a necessity, but I do use it quite a bit, is this stretch thread. It's called Eloflex. You can find it, I got mine at Fabricland. It's not hard to find. It goes on sale sometimes. So this is a stretch thread, and what that allows me to do is, in certain cases, I can just sew with a straight line stitch. I don't need to do a zigzag or a stretch stitch or whatever, and sometimes that's kind of nice to do. I wouldn't use this with a straight stitch on like bathing suits or on a seam that's going horizontally that really has to stretch. I would still add a zigzag into that, but overall this kind of gives me an extra layer of security that my stitches are not going to pop and that my seams aren't going to pop. So for instance, I used, not this color, I used gray, but I used that for this, and it made a really big difference. Number 4 is test on scraps. So you really do need to, unless you're really familiar with the fabric that you're working with, you need to test your seams on the scraps. And I know that that's a little bit irritating, and I'm certainly like that, but whatever you've cut out, just grab something from the side and try a couple of different things. So some of the things that I really like to use, I like to use a zigzag stitch, and I like to know numbers. So the width, if I'm doing a horizontal or a vertical stitch, like say down the side of a top, I will just do a 1 width, so it's only going back and forth a little bit, and a 2.5 length. That's what I'll use for a vertical seam. And then for something like this that has to stretch a lot, I might do either 2.5 or 3.5 width, and then again a 2.5 length. So you just kind of have to try out a couple things. Like try that out, try it on your specific fabric, and then look at the seam, look to see how it looks, tug on it, see how flexible it is. There's also the stretch stitch, which I don't really use very much, but Tilly talks about it in the book, and it's like a little lightning bolt, and people will use that as well. But other people too will not even do anything. They will just give their seam a slight stretch as they are sewing it with a straight stitch. I rarely do that. But for instance, on something like this where I'm just going down the side and it's not tight and it's not gonna have to, you know, stretch a whole lot, I might even just do a 0.5 width with a 2.5 length. So it's just ever so slightly, just to give myself a little safety, especially if I'm using something like this with the Eloflex. And then lastly, if you're just starting out with knits, I would suggest picking something thicker, heavier, with a little more structure. So sewing a very light, say a light t-shirt fabric or something that's really, really floppy and light, it's harder to kind of get the hang of it. I would say start with a ponte or a sweatshirt fabric. I find sweatshirt fabric really easy to sew with. Ponte, sweatshirt fabric, a thicker, more stable t-shirt material like this, even the stretch suede that you've seen me sew with a bunch, something like that that has its own kind of, you know, solidity to it, I think is a good thing to start with. And once you're more comfortable with a heavier knit, you can then move on to something a little bit floppier with a little more, you know, drape to it. And so you'll feel a lot more confident. So those are my top 5 tips. I hope that you'll give sewing with knits a try if you have been sort of putting it off and feeling intimidated by it. There are so many free patterns out for tank tops. This Durango tank is free, t-shirts that are free. There's no reason just to grab something and give it a shot. You could even grab a t-shirt or a sweatshirt from a secondhand store and cut that up and go from there. So thanks again for tuning in, you guys. I don't know what's coming up next. We shall see. I've been doing a lot of sewing lately and a lot of plans. So we'll see what comes up, but I hope that you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.